So you're tired of solo DPS queues and you want to play tank for Midnight Season 1, or perhaps you're already a tank main and you're looking to know what is going to be the meta tank. I have been playing the Midnight Beta for 3 months at this point, and I have tested all of these tanks multiple times in effectively every single key. I am excited to talk to you about the state of tanking, rank them on a tier list, and tell you the pros and cons of each of these tanks. But a few disclaimers first. If you want to skip ahead and hear what tank I'm going to talk about, and you want to hear your favorite tank, you can absolutely do that. There will be timestamps linked in the description of this video. Every single build that I have tested will be linked in Discord, so you're welcome to go into my Discord and see what I have tested. Nothing is final. There will definitely be at least one more tuning pass, but overall, I am actually quite happy with the state of tanking. I have a few fears about there being a tank shortage, so actually, it's a pretty good time to decide to tank, because if you're a good tank, I think that you'll be able to get into groups pretty easily, considering tanking is still quite difficult going into Midnight Season 1. Now, that being said, which is the best tank? The first caveat I want to say before I start ranking them is the fact that tank tuning is not final. We recently had a massive patch which completely shifted the meta once again. There might be one more of those. You have to remember that I am recording this on February 12th. The actual season doesn't start until March 24th. Heroic Week exists before that. If Heroic Week exists before that, most likely they will tune before Mythic comes out. So they're going to use that week to tune. If any tank is overperforming during that week, they will probably tune them down. That is very important to understand, because if you decide to re-roll before that week is actually done and before the Race to World First finishes, you might end up regretting your decision. Ultimately, at the time of recording this, you should play whatever tank feels best to you. Tanks have very different play styles, and you should ultimately play what you find fun. A WoW season is 6 months long, and if you find some friends to play with and you don't cry yourself to sleep in the shower, well, you shouldn't fall asleep in the shower anyways, but I guess I'm leaving that in the video. If you find yourself being lonely without a full B tag to play with, then you probably want to play the meta tank so that you don't just enjoy the capital city all the time. Okay, let's get into the rankings. Well, last thing to clarify is just the fact that every single one of these tanks is viable. The tank balance between the tanks right now is actually incredibly good. Better than the DPS, better than the healers. Those are kind of off right now, but they've done a pretty good job with tanks. So without further ado, I'm going to go bottom up. So we're going to start with the worst tank. But do keep in mind that this isn't the worst tank. If I'm ranking the tanks in a competitive tier list, I have to put this one at the bottom, because technically speaking, it provides the absolute least to your group in terms of value. Its numbers dictate its performance, given that it does not have the best utility package for keys, and it also, unfortunately, is the only tank without a group buff. So you know what tank this is. It is Blood DK. Recently received a lot of buffs. Therefore, it is no longer in C tier. I don't actually think any tank is in C tier. Blood DK is in B tier. It is actually a great tank for plus 10, plus 12, and plus 15. Its problems don't start until you get much higher. And it is so important that I clarify this, because technically speaking, this is the worst tank right now on beta. However, it is absolutely immortal in plus 12, plus 15, that range, Blood DK feels amazing. You do still have meaningful utility on this tank. Double grip is amazing for controlling pulls. You still actually have a good package to provide to your team. But comparatively to the other tanks, it is simply not, it's not comparable. Your damage is lower, and on top of the fact that your individual damage is lower, you have no group buff. Group buffs are so incredibly massive. You have to understand, it's going to be a theme of this list. If you compare Blood DK and Guardian Druid, and both of them were doing the exact same damage, okay? Exact same single target, same overall in AoE. What happens is the Guardian Druid provides 3% more damage to the group, simply by default of having Mark of the Wild. So the fact that Blood DK doesn't have a group buff, 3% of your DPS's damage is significantly more than you will do as a tank. Blood DK numbers, at least it doesn't feel that bad to play. That is such a big thing because you're not going to be trolling your team by choosing to play it, but its problems will become apparent as you get higher and higher and higher. Toward the kind of 19 range, and you can make this decision. Maybe you're not doing 19s and you love Blood DK. Again, you can totally play this tank, but it can fall over. It is still a Blood DK. They've simplified this a ton. The best part of Blood DK, in my experience testing it on beta, is I do still feel immortal, but it doesn't have a niche anymore. Let me talk about the best part first, and then I'll talk about kind of the downfalls of Blood DK. So the best part is that... Wait, hold up. No, I blanked. I'm sorry. That was so awkward of the timing. The timing of this, I blanked. Give me a second. I'm getting the thought back. Nope, that was terrible timing. Oh, that's staying in the video. Okay. All right. Yeah. Sorry. No. Hold on. Okay. The best part about Blood DK is that you are still pretty independent. There are other tanks which I would describe as being even more independent, but at this middle range of keys, you are very, very, very independent. Like, you are not actually needing your healer to help you that much. As long as you coordinate your own defensives and rotation well enough, you are going to be just fine, all right? The second best thing about Blood DK is the fact that they changed the interaction with Shattering Bones and CDR on Dancing Rune Weapon. At first, that was pretty bad, but the next part, the way that actually plays is that your setup globals are not nearly as bad, so your snap threat is significantly better. Whereas before, you had to do some weird decision-making, thinking, okay, do I min-max my own damage in numbers, or do I try and basically support my team by generating as much threat as possible in that first few globals? Whereas right now, when you walk in, you get your bone shield up, and then you're in the pole. So it's actually significantly better and smoother to play. That part is true. But the downfalls of it is mainly no group buff. Second, it can just fall over to simple auto attacks as key levels get higher. And there isn't much that you can do to outplay that. Like, it's pretty limited on what you can do. If you reach a barrier on this tank, there's only so much problem solving that you can do, all right? So that's kind of my thoughts about Blood DK. You still have AMZ, amazing cooldown. You still have grips, absolutely fantastic utility. I didn't just want to put this here and basically trash on it because there are good things about Blood DK, and there have been some pretty significantly good changes to this tank, okay? So that's my thoughts about Blood DK. What a way to start out the tier list, guys. On to the next tank. There is another tank that's in B tier. I was playing this all day today, and it actually feels pretty solid. But somehow, it received a nerf instead of a buff in the last patch notes, and therefore, based on numbers alone, it's falling behind. But this is a super interesting one, because I don't think inherently that there's anything that wrong with this tank, but it's Prot Warrior. As of right now, current tuning basically means that Prot Warrior is solidly in B. I would say this tank is pretty sturdy. It doesn't have survivability issues. It's actually quite tanky right now. The biggest problem is that Colossus is still unplayable because Snap Threat exists. You cannot get threat on Colossus. Even if numbers-wise it was better, you simply can't play it in Pugs because they're going to Zug and you have zero ability to gather pulls. Like, it's actually terrible on Colossus. On top of that, the recent nerfs kind of affect Colossus as well. They kind of buffed it, but then also, I don't know, there's some weird things going on, and Mountain Thane is effectively your bread and butter. You will be playing Mountain Thane as of right now if you play Warrior. Its single target DPS is not that bad in keys. Overall, it's decent. It does similar damage to my Blood DK. The problem is, it doesn't really have a niche, because Warrior, in this current retail season, Warrior is doing significantly more damage. But that's not true right now. On top of that, its group buff is less valuable with the current meta, but that could change. Remember, if Fury and Arms are not tuned that high, but all of a sudden the best DPS looks something like a Rogue or a Hunter or a DK or whatever it is you want, Warrior gains a ton of value because this group buff is incredibly valuable. I mean, this is still a very, very large group buff. So it has a lot of potential to be played. If it can survive the pulls, which right now it absolutely can, then you might see Warrior played. It just depends entirely on the comp. You don't really want to be in that position if you're kind of going into the new expansion and you're thinking to yourself, my tank is really only good if all these other factors line up. It's looking less and less likely. On top of the fact that very rarely do they let two tanks, the same tank, be meta for 2 seasons in a row. So the fact that Warrior was so dominant this last season, its playstyle is effectively unchanged. It's super weird, but Warrior is, of all these tanks, basically received the least amount of changes. It is still exactly the same. If you like that, by all means, play Warrior. It isn't that bad. Again, no tank right now is in C tier. After all the buffs, I think the tanks are looking a lot better. So those are our B tier tanks. We have Blood DK and Warrior. Warrior, I think, has significantly more value than Blood DK because although their damage is about the same, maybe Blood DK actually slightly higher, but this has a group buff, and that group buff absolutely carries it significantly harder. Okay, next, we have our A tier tanks. In my opinion, solidly at the bottom of A is Prot Pally. Prot Pally has received a bunch of changes, and this is once again a reminder of the fact that things do change, and they might change again, because in the original week of beta, the very first week, this tank was actually F tier. I would have to have added 3 more tiers to this and put that there. It was unplayable. They made a bunch of changes going in, and Prot Pally plays significantly differently than it used to, in the sense that its Apex talent changes its rotation without its last current tier set, in the sense that it has no more CDR on its major abilities, which is very, very strange. It feels okay after the buffs, but it's weird for sure. It's just a different version of Prot Pally. But ultimately, you still do all the things that Prot Pally does. You technically have no offensive group buff, but this tank is obviously unique in the sense that if you can play it, it makes keys feel significantly smoother. It is never going to be the highest DPS tank. You are losing damage by playing Prot Pally. But if your key just goes so much smoother because of your ability to control casters with your shield, because of your ability to help your team with sack, bop, lay on hands, spell ward, etc., and different mechanics, then it kind of makes up for that. I do think in my testing, I absolutely did find that there is a limit to how long you can play crit wings. 100% there is a clinical actual key level where crit wings is no longer viable. If you're playing crit wings, your damage is very solid, but you probably will have to swap Sentinel around 17, 18 even. I mean, there were some pulls in Magister's Terrace on 15 when I was playing crit wings. 15 is not that high on beta, and I actually got 100 to 10% health with a single melee, and that was within wings. Like, I didn't have Ardent or Kings up, but that's with my wings up, so it's like, you're getting clapped. That's full. Like, I'm standing in my Consecrate, which is only a 5% DR now, but still, and I have my shield up. It's not like I misplayed it terribly. It's just, you are getting clapped. The recent armor nerf definitely was a little uncalled for. I already think that Pally, after the damage nerfs, was kind of out of the cheesecake tier. So it got that armor nerf, and that definitely affects it because that's what it's weak against. And I absolutely did notice that. So I do think that this season is going to be very much about tank survivability. Of all the things in these dungeons, you really have to figure out how to live as a tank. There's a lot of different tank busters, of bleeds, of magic damage. Like, you have to be able to survive as a tank. So if Prot Pally can be played, it is always going to be very valuable and useful because nothing else will make your key feel smoother than a good Prot Paladin. But it also requires quite a bit of external healing. If you're playing Sentinel, you're much tankier, but then again, you kind of lose your niche of, I'm just sort of here as a support, because now I'm doing, less damage than these tanks, but at least I have a much better utility package for these keys, and like I said, if you can live, then it's good. But do remember, the original week of Prot Pally, it was F tier, then they massively changed it, and then they nerfed it, and then they nerfed it one more time, and now it's about where it's at now. I don't think it's bad. I think it's pretty solid, but it might have survivability issues. And I think if you have to play Sentinel, you're unlikely to see this at a very high level. You kind of lose a lot of value of what Prot Pally brings if you bring Sentinel. Like, if you have to play Sentinel, then you would probably want to make another tank work that does significantly more damage. That's my opinion. Yeah, those are my thoughts on Prot Pally. It does make keys feel safer. I enjoy playing it right now because I have a lot of agency and I like having agency as a tank. Okay, moving on. The next tank that I'm going to rank is VDH. I think VDH is also an A tier, and I think it is definitely above Paladin. Right now, VDH has been very strange to test because it was bugged for the entirety of beta cycle. If you're not familiar with the bug on VDH, it is the fact there is actually a few bugs with resource generation among other things, but the main one is the most egregious, which is that Fiery Brand has like casually 3 times the uptime that it should have, because whenever it spreads to a new target, you get it refreshed. It's supposed to have an X duration, which is not that long, but it's just kind of rolling like consistently in pulls. So that's a massive DR. On top of the fact that it's a massive DR, Revel in Pain was also a talent that some people were taking, which buffed it even further, although not everybody was playing Revel, actually. So that's kind of a minor coinkydink, you could say. The problem with VDH is that if they fix that bug, this tank's in a very interesting position. It has been simplified, I think, more than any other tank. It is genuinely very, very, very straightforward. This is the easiest iteration of VDH I have ever seen. Even when it was OP at the end of Dragonflight, it still had a lot of complexities with frailty, with calcified spikes, with a bunch of different things. Now, all that's gone. Like, you really are just you hit Fiery Brand, when you're gathering, try not to take too many melees, then you fracture Soul Cleave, and you even Spirit Bomb. That's it. Now, I would say one of the coolest things about VDH is your Apex talent is easily the best Apex talent out of all the 6 tanks. Like, unbelievably cool Apex talent. Not tuning, just the fact you get an extra meta. If they just simply made that, by the way, if every tank's Apex talent was you get your extra big cooldown for a little bit, holy, that would be amazing. Imagine Guardian Druid, extra Incarn, Pally, extra wings, like, oh, that would feel amazing. So those extra metas do feel very cool, especially because you're playing Annihilator, so you get the reset on your Spirit Bomb, and sometimes you can high roll your stacks, which is kind of cool. Okay, here are the problems with VDH. A, when they fix all the bugs, it'll go down. All tanks are bugged negatively except this one. This one is bugged positively, so that's a problem with this. Okay, next, because they're so simple now, they don't have a lot of tuning potential. That's one of the weirdest things, in my opinion, about VDH, is that if they were bad, they would have a hard time buffing them adequately. Because where are they going to put the tuning? Do they give them extra armor from Spikes? Spikes has over 100% uptime. I guess they could do that for some Fizz DR. That's not exactly their problem, though. Do they change, like, you don't have Illuminated Sigil, you're playing double Fiery Brand. Like where do they adjust VDH tuning? And I think that in my head, that's a bit of a weird thing. They could just add a few percent more DR if you're playing some of the talents that still give you DR, but they're all very passive now. So in terms of active decision-making on VDH, I worry about their tuning. They're either going to land it in kind of like a this is very powerful spot, but if they're not careful, then it'll actually just be kind of unplayable because you don't really have a ton of nuance in your rotation when you are really just Fracture, Soul Cleave, Spirit Bomb. Like, if they decide to mess with some values, I feel like VDH could be either in a lot of trouble or have a lot of benefit from that. And that's kind of like an interesting part of it. As of right now, though, it's feeling very strong. Annihilator is annoying to play. Some people have described it as fun. I find RNG on tanks to be annoying, personally speaking. I really like having stability on the tanks that I play. I'm not a huge fan of constantly responding to whether or not I get the proc of the thing I want. And since Eldrazi was nerfed, I absolutely feel that on Annihilator. It is very powerful. Borderline, you could put it in Cheesecake, but I have a feeling that when the bugs get fixed and everything kind of settles down, VDH will be solid A tier. But Annihilator, if you don't know, the 35% chance on each fracture does create some weird gameplay where if you're trying to min-max your meteor stacks, there's some weird pressure to either not hit meta or do hit meta. Do you Spirit Bomb now? How can I coordinate this? And I don't really like that sort of decision making, in my opinion. This is a personal preference, and ultimately my opinion is but one of many. That's what I think about VDH. I kind of wish Eldrachi was back because I found that to be very fun. I liked Eldrachi, but I don't really like Annihilator, so you probably won't find me playing this tank even if it was really good. It's still very fast, it has a great Apex talent, and does provide Chaos Brand. The last thing I'll say about VDH, of course, in terms of its group buff, is we all know that Blizzard really wants you to play their new thing. And their new thing is Devourer. So Devourer is almost certainly going to be meta. I'd be pretty shocked if it wasn't. There are some problems with that spec, but ultimately, it's pretty good for keys. It's got everything you want for keys. And they're definitely buffing it so that it's at least very good. You won't play 2 VDHs. They would have to really mess up the tank balance if you were going to play a Devourer and a VDH. So it's a little weird. I think that the state of VDH in terms of its meta viability, which is hilarious because it is literally the meta tank, I have a feeling it's not going to be the meta tank going into Midnight for all the reasons that I have mentioned. Okay, now moving on to some of the Cheesecake tanks. The first tank in Cheesecake, believe it or not, there are 2 in my opinion right now. The first one is Bear. I want to say, for all the Guardian Druids listening right now, I did kind of want to sandbag this. In the back of my head, I was like, okay, I should definitely rank this lower. However, I ultimately decided to tell the truth. That's the type of person I am. Guardian is really good at the moment. It, however, needs a very strong caveat. One of the reasons it's good is because recently there was a massive damage buff. There was also a survivability nerf on top of its damage buff. That survivability nerf has been felt. Urso's Fury going down to 30% from 40% is noticeable. On top of that, there is kind of a degenerate playstyle, where if you are talented and you're playing Druid of the Claw, there is a problem, which is that a lot of Guardian Druids playing the quote-unquote meta build are going to die. And I just strongly encourage Blizzard, they should probably nerf it because it's doing too much damage. Survivability-wise, it's not that far ahead. It's probably equal to something like VDH or Borderline. It's a little tankier than Sentinel Prot Pally, but it's not as tanky as the tank that I'm going to rank next. So it doesn't need a survivability nerf. It doesn't need a baseline nerf. The only thing that's doing that much damage is a specific Druid of the Claw build, which they can nerf directly. So much of your damage, like literally 50 to 60% of your damage, is coming from one ability. It's Ravage. They need to nerf Ravage. That would be fair, and it would be all right. If they nerf Ravage by 20%, okay. If they nerf Moonless Night by 10%, 20% again, that's fine. Then Guardian lands in a very solid spot. Like, it would basically bring Guardian to A. As of right now, the reason I can't rank it in A is simply because of how much damage it's doing. It's very, very valuable because its single target damage is so incredibly high, and its overall is actually competing with some other tanks, but effectively, its single target is so high. So they need to nerf Druid of the Claw. But I am one of the few people who has been testing Elun's Chosen pretty constantly because I prefer Elun's Chosen, and obviously I like Guardian Druid. So in my testing, I've done a ton of EC keys. EC is very reasonable right now. It's not overtuned, it's not undertuned. After the last set of buffs and nerfs, I think it's about perfect. If you misplay, you're gonna die. You're not overly tanky, but you're not doing crazy damage either. You're doing a reasonable amount of damage as Elun's Chosen. The only build that is doing too much damage is Druid of the Claw. So when the nerfs come in, which they will, because there's no way they let a tank do that much single target damage, it's the one thing they never, ever, 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 ever allow, is tanks to do more damage than DPS, especially single target. They really hate that. They need to nerf Ravage in particular, or just adjust Druid of the Claw a little bit, okay? That is the thing to understand. The other problem with Druid, of course, is that its group buff is comparative. It's sharing the same group buff as Resto Druid, which is so dominant and has been so dominant for the entirety of the beta cycle. From the first week of beta to right now, the meta healer has been decided, and it doesn't look like it's changing anytime soon. They've nerfed it like 3 times, and they haven't nerfed it enough. And I worry they won't nerf Resto Druid enough because it's not overperforming in Raid. So they're going to try to balance it between Raid and keys. That's a problem. They should actually just change that as a metric for the future. So Druid does not look like it's in my opinion, very, very strong meta contention. But it's very solid right now. That being said, if I ranked it in A, I'd be lying to you. Currently, with Druid of the Claw numbers, and that's what this list is, it is actually currently, if this is current tuning, Druid of the Claw belongs in Cheesecake. But if I was separating this by hero talents, I would simply put Elun's Chosen in A or B. I would probably put it in A because Druid does have a lot to offer. This dungeon profile, the off-healing from Druid is something a lot of Druids are going to be unfamiliar with. But you have Dream of Cenarius back, which is a massive Omega Giga heal for your team. After the Wildfire's been nerfed a lot, so you don't really worry about that anymore. But basically, you have Curse Dispel, which is pretty valuable in a few of these dungeons. It's quite valuable, in fact. You have Poison Dispel, which is valuable on a few pulls. You have Vortex, which is very helpful on a few packs. And the ability of Druid to both live and kind of coordinate the team is helpful. Remember, though, you notoriously don't have the best kit for Mythic Plus. You have no Leg Sweep. You have no Ring of Peace. You have no Tiger's Lust or Freedom, which are amazing, really, really strong cooldowns right now, okay? Because there are some mechanics that they completely mitigate. You do have the off-healing. You have no AoE silence. You have no sigils. You have no grip. Actually speaking, one of the weirdest things about this tier list is that the 2 highest tuned tanks right now are, technically speaking, the ones with the least amount to offer your team, arguably speaking. Because there's a reason that the last several seasons have been Prot, Pally, VDH, and Warrior. Just because of what this can do. There are so many pulls where having the shields, kicks, is going to carry hardcore, otherwise a fear might go off. There are so many pulls where having sigils is just going to make your pull so much cleaner, or having interrupting shout and AoE silence, Omega button. Druid doesn't have that. Neither does Brewmaster, which we'll talk about in a second. I have a few more things to say about Druid. I think that one of the coolest things Druid has going for it is that of all the tanks, this one has the best, and I mean the best, ability to live one-shots because of a new talent. I am slightly worried they will nerf that talent. Please don't. It's pretty reasonable, and it's part of why Druid is able to live these keys. You have a talent called Natural Resilience. It overshields you with Frenzied Regen. I like mechanics like that. Everybody likes mechanics where if you overheal with your self-heal, you get an Absorb Shield. It's very nice. Because of how this tank works at the moment, we don't have as much coverage as we did before, a little bit less, just a tiny bit, and therefore we could really use that extra little defensive. So I really like that. Please keep that. Don't nerf it. But on logs, it's doing quite a lot, so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a small nerf to that. I do think that this is fair. A lot of these dungeons are very mean to Druid in particular. I actually think that if it isn't tuned highly, Druid literally drops to here or here, because it will have a problem living. If they accidentally nerf its survivability further, and they don't just look at Druid of the Claw and realize it's doing so much damage, I think Druid will be in a really, really rough spot. Because so many of these pulls actually clap Druid. I'm thinking about the Battle Axes in Algothar Academy. I'm thinking at some of the pulls in Nexus. I'm thinking about a few of the things in Magister's Terrace. There are a few pulls that are really challenging for tanks, and all tanks have a really good way to deal with it. But without that Frenzied Regen shield and some of the survivability that it has, I think that Bear could legitimately struggle to live simply an equivalent level of key. So I'm hoping that this is where I'm saying, if the tank's in Cheesecake, remember, you don't want your spec to be an S tier. Anything that I rank in S tier needs to have like a, how do they nerf this? Because ideally for me, the tanks should all be like this. I would say that this is a healthy tank meta. Let's say that it all looked like this. I think that that's healthy. Like basically 1 or 2 tanks that are maybe slightly behind but definitely playable, and then 4 tanks that are really solid. What I don't like, and this is the good thing about tank tuning right now, I don't like for the tanks, we're going to rank Brewmaster in a second, to look like one of them is here, 2 of tanks are in Cheesecake, and the rest are in C. This is a bad tank balance. because this happens on a lot of seasons. Oftentimes, they just don't really balance tanks for keys, and it really does look like this. So I'm very happy that it currently does not look like that. Actually, I think right now, the tank balance is pretty decent. So let's talk about the last tank, Brewmaster. Brewmaster is definitely the best tank on beta right now. The only reason Druid is here is because of how much damage it's doing. Otherwise, Brewmaster is by definite, no one's arguing the fact that this tank is the best. Why is it the best, though? Because you've never seen this. When was the last time you saw Brewmaster being the technical best tank for Mythic Plus? Been a hot minute, okay? The reason that Brewmaster is the best is because of what these keys demand. The timer on a lot of these dungeons is not necessarily the real challenge. There are some DPS that are heavily overperforming, okay? The question is this: why is Brewmaster the best? It is very simple. With the changes and the pruning, this tank can live. It is just that tanky. Its damage is not the highest. Its single target is not the highest. It is actually because this tank is a live lord. If you play it well, which is not as hard to play anymore, but I don't subscribe to the idea that it's easy to play either, this tank just lives. It does still require some external healing, but you have significantly more options and availability to game your own rotation to basically be more self-sufficient. The Vital Flame changes and just how much that's doing is really, really awesome. It is strange because this rotation is different than it used to be. My problem with Brew, and let me talk about my problem with it before I talk about all the benefits aside from it living. Okay, so one of my problems with Brew is that people say that right now this is so easy. This is the easiest tank. Just pick up Brewmaster. All you do is keg and then fire and then keg and then fire and then keg and then fire. And it's like, that's it. Here's the problem. A lot of times people who say that have already been playing Brew for a very long time. This tank is still very much a set of conditionals rather than an actual rotation. Because technically speaking, you keg and then fire unless keg is coming, unless you have one charge of it, and then you're still recharging, and then you want a blackout kick. And then instead of that, you go here, and then instead of this, you go there. And then you want to fill purifying, but you want to keep all your brews here because of the Apex talent. And then to try to force proc this, you want to go there. And it's like, if this, then that. And so you're constantly playing a little bit of a mini game, whereas technically your rotation is simplified. You're kind of just constantly juggling this mini game of, can I see if I can get empty kicks? Like, you just really want your Apex talent to proc more. And there's a lot of people who find that gameplay super fun, but it is also RNG. You can try to technically force the RNG, but it's still RNG. And I'm not a huge fan of the RNG gameplay for tanks myself. Now, to be fair, a lot of that is RNG offensively. To be fair, defensively, you know that this tank can live as long as you don't oversend, panic, and play poorly. The other problem I have with it is that snap threat is still an issue. A lot of brews, for some reason, they will really depend on spinning crane kick and overuse that button. And I have found personally that it is problematic to play with them. I have not personally noticed my keys being smoother in any way, shape, or form healing this tank. It is undeniably the meta tank as of right now, but I don't find it actually contributing positively to my keys. It's possible it's because I'm playing with meta rerollers who aren't very familiar with it, but in general, I as a healer would rather see a warrior, VDH, or bear in my key. I find these tanks to be easier to heal, whereas this tank, if they're really, I've played with some very good Brewmasters, but I've also played with some Brewmasters that make me question things. And I feel like I am still spam healing them. Like, I am really working hard to keep them alive. That could be their own rotational error, but nonetheless, it's important for me to mention that. At a meta level, when you play it perfectly, Brewmaster is excellent. But at a weekly 10 to 12 to 15, I actually think this tank is going to troll a lot of keys because it still has some issues that, just because it's now in the spotlight, have not actually been addressed. I'd love for this to have a little bit better snap threat, or at least another option for snap threat. I don't know what the solution is, but I would very much like a little bit of help for Brewmaster to secure its position in mid-range keys. Because it still seems to me like it depends a lot on kind of everything going well. That is my personal opinion. Okay, now other things that Brewmaster provides, and this is super interesting. One, Ring of Peace is very valuable in a lot of these dungeons. There are some mechanics that really can just be completely avoided with Ring of Peace. The other thing is that Leg Sweep is very, very solid right now. And on top of that, okay, Tiger's Lust. Tiger's Lust and Freedom actually mitigates, I'm thinking in particular, Pit of Sauron. There is a heavy, heavy, heavy dot that gets applied to your party, but it's a movement speed slow. So Druids can shift it, but Pallies can Freedom and Tiger's Lust. Also, the Gargoyle that comes and goes and picks you up and drags you up into the air and drops you, you can Tiger's Lust that. And you can have it up for every single Gargoyle pull. That's amazing. There's a lot of little things that Brew can do right now that are solid, that are very, very solid. So the one weirdest thing about it is that what currently are the meta DPS don't actually benefit from Brewmaster, and yet you're still seeing it played. I recently released a video talking about the current meta, and it was very strange to me because really people are actually playing like Arcane Mage, Demo Warlock, and Og Evoker. And those specs do not benefit from Mystic Touch. There is a funny interaction, actually, where Demonology Warlock does have some physical damage, but Arcane Mage doesn't. Og Evoker basically doesn't. So it's strange. It's very weird that Brew is considered the tank, because actually, if you were going to be playing your... if you were going to be playing that comp, a VDH would technically suit that way better. You know, there are other tanks you could play that would technically suit that better. But actually, people are playing Brewmaster. And if you look at those logs, it's not necessarily because of its damage. It's simply because it enables the pulls. As I mentioned before, this season, I think, will be determined by which tank is the most durable, a little bit less which tank has the best utility, which is a strange season. Most of the time, tanks can actually just live as long as they game well. But I think this season is going to be a lot more about just surviving. Tanking is going to be hard going into Midnight Season 1, and I think there will be a tank shortage. I absolutely foresee there being a tank shortage. There are a ton of mechanics that you need to have either studied, you need to know, or whatever. There's a ton of things you need to know. Like, I was starting to make these dungeon guides, giving masterclass information and deep diving and going over every single pull and how you need to understand them. Bro, the first one is an hour and 20 minutes long. Because I was like, but you need to know this. Like, there's this, and there's that, and there's this, and this is what you need to know here, and here's how you route this, and here's how you paste this, and here's how you do that. I'm like, oh my God, it's crazy. Like, I'm sitting there, and I'm just like, I'm trying to keep this brief, but it ends up being an hour and 20 minutes long. And that's exciting for me, but I'm like, okay, I got to figure out a way to make this next one just an hour or something, because I don't know how many people are going to sit and watch like an 80-minute guide on how to do this dungeon. So keep in mind that the tank you feel the most comfortable on is probably going to be the one you live the best on. Even if Brew is this good, if you meta reroll to Brew, I don't necessarily think that you're going to have an easier time than if you played your comfy tank, which is Warrior. Not necessarily. So it is important to realize that distinction, and those are kind of my thoughts about the tanks. I would say there's some interchangeable information here, but give or take, all tanks are within a tier of each other. And that's a really good balance. I still think they could buff Blood DK a little bit more, but they won't because of Raid, which is a big problem. They really need to separate this or just give it a group buff. You give this a 2% haste buff and it will feel much better, something like that. I think Warrior did not deserve the nerf that it recently got. I think it absolutely, even if it was doing 10-20% more damage, it still wouldn't be here. It would be like here. So I think they could probably revert that and just look at the numbers here a little bit. But it's actually interesting, the fact that all tanks are pretty playable. You'll see people be able to do 20s on beta on pretty much any tank. I don't think that any tank will so significantly struggle, and they are playable. So the conversation is just what is tuned a little bit higher than the others and what provides more value to your team. So ultimately, you should play whatever you want. And I said this at the beginning, and I'll say it again before we end. The WoW season is 6 months long. All these tanks are viable. Plus, there's going to be more tuning. The one thing I wouldn't hold out hope for, and it depends, unless they make some changes to how they tune. If something is good in raid, they probably won't be very good in keys. So you have to be careful about that. Blood DK unfortunately falls into this. Now, I want to clarify as well. The best Pug list, the best tank for 3K does not look like this. There are some things I would change about that, but I'm going to cave that for another video, okay? I want to do that possibly tomorrow or something like that, okay? Let's go over it then. All right, that is my tank tier list. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you later.